This is the Scarcity Studios YouTube channel. Please don't forget to like, comment, share and subscribe. 2 years ago we covered the shooting of Chris Kaba by armed police in Streatham. We also covered the protest that followed and the trial that has took place, and we are now able to put the whole story together after the police officer that was responsible for shooting him dead has been cleared of murder. This trial took place at the Old Bailey, and we had footage from the scene at the time, and now we have a lot of footage that has been released in, for example, body cam footage of the police interaction and shooting, and also helicopter footage and diagrams that can help us to understand it, and you can decide for yourself if you believe that this result was fair. In order to understand the story, we have to go back to the 5th of September 2022, when the Metropolitan Police tried to stop Chris, who was driving an Audi Q8, and he drove from Camberwell to Streatham before he was stopped. This dashcam footage shows the moment the police actually flagged his car down. He wasn't being chased at this moment, he was just driving through the streets, and this is when the car that was connected, the police said, to a shooting that took place the day before. Chris Kaba was not registered to the car, but it wasn't stolen, but it must have been a friend that he'd borrowed the car from. When he arrived in the Streatham area, and this is when the pursuit began, and then he made it onto a road, and then he wedged himself between two vehicles when armed police jumped out of the car, and the car was trapped. You could hear the wheels spinning, as this video will show you. And it was at this moment that armed officer Martyn Blake opened fire through the windscreen and shot Chris Kaba dead. Helicopter footage also shows the moment that the police are surrounding the car as well, and it can show you how fast this took place, and this will also be relevant when we talk about the police officer being questioned in relation to him exaggerating his statements. It was said in an official statement today that the police did not know that Chris was driving the car. Chris was unarmed and he had his hands clearly visible on the steering wheel when Blake rushed out of the car and shot him within several seconds of exiting his vehicle. The prosecution argued that the trained officer decided to shoot whilst the car was still stationary and it was blocked in, and there was no risk to anybody else, especially the police officers. Martyn Blake denied this, and he was also accused of making exaggerated statements to create an element of danger that did not exist when he decided to shoot Chris Kaba dead.
Doors! Oh, police! Show me your hands! Show me your hands!
Martyn Blake was charged with murder by the Crown Prosecution Service on the 20th of September 2023. At no point during this did the defence put up an application for no case to answer. But on the 22nd of October 2024, the jury has found him not guilty of murder. His family have said in a statement that today we are devastated. The not guilty verdict leaves us with deep pain of injustice, adding to the unbearable sorrow of losing Chris. No family should ever endure the unimaginable grief that we have faced. Chris was taken from us, and the decision shows that his life and many others like him does not matter to the system. The prosecution cross-examined Martyn Blake during the trial, and the Old Bailey heard that the bullet travelled at 800 metres a second and was fired from metres away by Blake, who made a split-second decision as he feared for his colleague's life. The prosecution showed the court footage of the incident and said that Blake had got key parts of his statement wrong when he said it was acting in self-defence. The Audi was boxed in, and it rammed and revved its engine as it tried to escape, and it struck a police car. Police then tightened the box, and 17 seconds after the vehicle was forced to stop, Blake fired a single shot through its windscreen. The officer said that he feared for his colleagues who were close to the car, and they would immediately have been ran over or dragged under its wheels if he had continued. The prosecution ran the footage from the body-worn cameras and the vehicles on the day and said that the police were not as close as Blake made out, and Blake said that the Audi had driven at him, but little said in the footage that it showed that he didn't. The prosecutor said that the vehicle actually drives away from you rather than towards you, and Blake said, "At the time I felt he was coming towards me, and it certainly made me feel uncomfortable." The prosecution then asked the police officer if he accepted the vehicle had came to a halt and was stationary when he shot him dead. Blake said that he did not know. The prosecution said, "You discharged your firearm without properly assessing the risk in front of you." The officer replied, "I disagree," and the prosecution replied back and said, "You discharged your firearm and you should not have done so," and Blake disagreed. The officer told the court that he opened fire not intending to kill, but trying to incapacitate the driver and stop the vehicle. He said that he aimed around the area of the steering wheel, and I aimed my firearm at the central body mass that we are trained to do, and that is just over the steering wheel. I was aware the bullet would hit the body at some point, but I didn't intend to kill him, and if he had stopped the vehicle then, I wouldn't have shot again. But as the prosecution mentioned, at the moment the firearm was discharged, the vehicle was stationary and blocked in between two cars. A lot of information is now able to be discussed and released by the police following the trial, because they can't release certain information during trials in case it may affect the trial and maybe somebody could not get justice. So for example, nobody in the jury was told about Chris Kaba's previous convictions or his connections to any other cases. But following the reporting restrictions that have been lifted, the Old Bailey judge has now allowed it to be reported about previous case that Chris Kaba was on at the time. Chris Kaba was accused of shooting a man and being caught on CCTV doing it inside a nightclub in Hackney. The video footage was not allowed to be released before due to it maybe affecting the trial that had taken place. It was also revealed during the post-mortem toxicology report that cocaine was found in his system. This does not necessarily mean that he took cocaine. He could have touched cocaine or been cross-contaminated, but at the same time, that is what the results revealed. It was also said that gun residue was found on his sleeve and balaclava inside his car, which would also be strong evidence that he'd recently used a firearm. They also revealed in court that he was a leading member of a gang in Brixton called 6-7 that the police consider to be the most dangerous gang in South London. This was 6 days before his death when Chris Kaba was caught on CCTV waving a firearm inside a nightclub and shooting a man and then chasing him down and firing at him multiple times. The CCTV shows the moment that he fires at the victim, who was Brandon Maluzzi, and he chased him outside the Oval Space Club in Hackney and one of the bullets hit him in the leg. And if Chris Kaba hadn't been killed, he would have stood trial at the Old Bailey along with his accomplices on the evening of the shooting, who have also been convicted. It was believed that the victim belonged to a gang called 17 and he was flown by air ambulance to the Royal Hospital but somehow survived his injuries. Mr. Kaba's friends, Shemaiah Bow and Marcus Pottinger, were both found guilty of wounding with intent, and Kanal Bang Boye was convicted of possession of a firearm with intent to cause fear of violence. And of course, it's very important to make sure that all the information available is included, as I said at the beginning, to make sure that everybody make their mind up for themselves what they believe the truth is.
The jury system is the cornerstone of British justice, and today, after 2 weeks of evidence, 12 men and women have cleared Sergeant Martyn Blake of murder. Over the last 2 years, Sergeant Blake has paid a huge personal and professional sacrifice. This has been an incredibly difficult time for him and for his family, and he has acted with professionalism and with dignity throughout. This case has had an enormous impact on many. Mr. Kaba's family and friends continue to grieve the loss of a loved one, and today will be tremendously difficult for them. Today's verdict is significant. No firearms officer sets out on duty intent on ending a life. Their sole purpose is the complete opposite: the protection and the preservation of life. Throughout the trial, the jury heard significant detail about the scenes that Sergeant Blake faced that night. They were told that the car Mr. Kaba was driving had been linked to a reported shooting the night before. The suspects were still at large and no gun had been recovered. Armed officers bravely intervened, not knowing the risk that they were about to face. The court heard Mr. Kaba tried to evade police, ramming his vehicle into the others around him. Sergeant Blake made a split-second decision on what he believed was necessary to protect his colleagues and London. The jury decided that was an honestly held belief and that the force used was reasonable. Any fatal use of force understandably prompts huge concern amongst communities, particularly black communities where trust in policing is low. There remains much for us to do to strengthen confidence in our service, and we know that incidents like this can place further strain on already difficult relationships. No police officer is above the law, but we've been clear that the system holding police to account is broken. I worry about the lack of support officers face for doing their best. But most of all, I worry for the public. The more that we crush the spirit of good officers, the less that they can fight crime. That risks London becoming less safe. Our armed officers respond to more than 4,000 incidents each year, but there are only 1 or 2 incidents where shots are fired by police each year. It is undeniable that they are the most professional, most accountable and most cautious in their use of lethal force in the world. Their operations have prevented countless acts of violence across our city. For example, last year alone they removed more than 400 guns from our streets. I remain humbled and deeply proud of officers who continue to protect London despite the risks they face. They continue to have my full and my unwavering support.
The Independent Office of Police Conduct, who are the people that investigate crimes with the police, said, "Firstly, we want to acknowledge that Chris Kaba's family and friends today continue to grieve for his death more than 2 years later. Our thoughts and sympathies remain with them. The past few weeks have been incredibly difficult and distressing for his family, and we have sat through the trial, listened to all the evidence, and witnessed the final moments of his life played out in court. We also recognise the impact this trial has had on the police that was involved, as well as the firearms colleagues and the wider policing community. Today a jury has considered all the evidence and Police Sergeant Martyn Blake was cleared of murder. The IOPC's role is to independently investigate the circumstances surrounding any police shooting that include the decision to use lethal force. The decision to criminally investigate Sergeant Blake and then refer the case to the Crown Prosecution Service followed careful consideration and a significant amount of evidence gathered during our investigation, and by applying the relevant legal tests that govern our work. It's taken a long time for this information to emerge, and of course for some people this verdict is not what they wanted to hear and they don't believe that it's accurate. But I really want to hear what the viewers have to say and share your thoughts as well. Please try and be constructive in the comments, and also follow on other social media so we can also get involved in the stories that are discussed and covered on the channel every single day. So really appreciate you joining me for this episode. I'll be back again very shortly with some more news. Rest in peace to Chris Kaba and my condolences to his family.